Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Behind the Veil, a show that provides insight into the world of weddings. Today, we're going to be talking about good business practices, how to be a good business owner, as well as being a creative type, because I know a million amazing, over-the-top, creative human beings, some of the most creative people I've ever met in the entire world. But does that mean they're a good business person? And specifically, as we come out of COVID and our businesses start to grow pretty dramatically, when do we have the choice of bringing on employees or talking about contractors? And what really is the difference? Is there a difference? Well, today we have Michelle Loretta, who's going to be joining us shortly. That's going to help us kind of navigate some of these questions. But before I bring her on, let me introduce Marcy Gutenberg with An Affair to Remember by Marcy. Hi, Marcy.
Hi, Kate.
So I'm super excited because our guest today comes from the invitation world. Hello,
Yes.
you finally have someone.
I have some company today.
So, and you're a small business person as well. So, it's one of those things. It's when do you contract versus hire? I mean, even though, and I think I confuse those two terms a lot of times, that contract and hiring somebody can mean something different. But luckily, we have Michelle Loretta. Michelle, welcome to the show. I just wanted to talk about your bio a little bit. You have a degree in accounting, and you were in the stationery business way back in 2004. And then 2009, you're like, oh, I'm going to start educating some of my peers. Like you decided like, oh, you know what? I'm really good at running a business.
It really stemmed from my corporate background, to be quite honest, because, in 2009, not a lot of people in our industry were talking about the business side of events. Right. So you'd go to a conference and you'd learn how to throw an amazing event. And so a lot of the education was more focused on the creative side of it. And so coming from corporate, like a big accounting firm like Deloitte, and I also worked for Coach and an importer of children's clothing as well, and I've worn different business hats. Right. There's some lessons that we can learn from corporate that we should be applying in our industry. Nobody's talking about these things, like how to write a business plan, for example, or what a financial strategy is all about. And so the business blog was started really because of the corporate background. Yes, I had a stationery business, but it was the corporate lessons that I was trying to bring to the table in our industry.
Yeah, and it's my fault. I didn't talk about the big companies, Deloitte and Coach. Yeah, and by the way, welcome Brooke Logan Stoner. That was my fault, by the way. Again, second week in a row, it's my fault that she's a little late. So apologies.
It's like I got that raise last month. I'm just saying.
No, exactly, right? But
hello, everyone, and welcome, Michelle.
Hello.
Hi, Marcy.
But
Keith.
What? I know, thank you. Exactly. She's like second week in a row, dude. Okay, come on.
It's okay.
But okay. So you just said a scary word, business plan. I mean, as a entrepreneur that got into the creative side, I mean, I came from the world of hotels, so events seemed like a natural progression. It's like my biggest thing about getting into this business was trying to figure out how much I should charge and how much my worth was, like where I fit in but sitting down and actually writing out a business plan, I'm like, well, is it yellow? Is it a pattern? Is there lighting involved?
Board.
Exactly. I invented
the glue for Post-its.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly. So, before we get into versus contractor versus employee, the business plan side of it. Explain exactly what a business plan is on the quick side.
You're so right. You say the word business plan, especially around a bunch of creatives, and they're like, "Oh my god!" That sounds like the most painful, grueling thing. Like, do I really have to write a business plan?
Oh, it's horrible.
Some of us have maybe heard about it, or if you went to business school, you may have had to put one together, and it was like a painful process. But business plan doesn't need to be like that. You don't need to follow that really structured document type of thing for your business plan. The beauty of writing a business plan is the thinking that goes behind it, right? And it comes down to like, what is my business all about? Who am I selling to? What am I selling? Oh, how am I going to price it? How are they going to learn about it? Why is it that they want it? Who's going to deliver it? The operational structure, the staffing, the production side of things. And then how am I going to make money off of it? I mean, that in a nutshell is a business plan.
Man, I started phasing out just even.
I know.
Yeah,
and that was
Glad
like
he's
the
laughing.
5-second version of a business plan. We can work together on one for 3 months if you want.
See, that's awesome. I love the idea of the 3 months, but I get it. Everything that you're saying makes total sense. But when I hear business plan, I'm thinking of like a 40-page document, all single line spacing, and does it have to be as complicated as that?
Do that? Yeah, no, nobody needs to do that. So when I work with people, I tell them like, put it in a format that's going to make sense for you. And for a lot of people, that's literally like headers with bullets, right? Like it's like a planning sheet. Like this is who I ideally want to be selling to. This is where they're looking for information, and it's like lists and bullet points, right? It becomes kind of like the strategy guide. But if you want to make like, Pinterest boards for it instead, or some people put together like, dream bulletin boards, you can make the business plan however you want, right? Like you can do magazine cutouts if like that's what you're going to connect with, right? Now, if you're going to go ask somebody for money, they may want something more structured, maybe even not a document. It's probably going to be like a PowerPoint. They may not even look at they may only look at the numbers, to be quite honest. So I'm talking like bankers or investors, right? So that process may be a little bit more, structured. But the reality is in our industry, we're not writing business plans for money, right? Like people don't give event producers money to grow their businesses. Typically it's unusual. So we're writing it for ourselves to really think through all pieces of the business.
And I love that because it also it helps you kind of align your goals and I like what you said, dream board, because I think everybody can relate to a dream board, and to have that as a you could actually use that as your business plan, a dream board. Awesome. Really? Okay, honestly, I get that.
For the marketing piece, you could define your ideal customer. Like traditionally, it's called target market, right? But these days, we talk more about like an ideal client that you want to work with. Like, who is she, right? I was working with somebody that she's like, oh, she's Tracy Ellis Ross, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm getting so many ideas of like who this client is and why they would buy from you, right? Like, let's define like what does Tracy Ellis Ross want in her life. Now I get it. That's a lot more tangible, visible, and interesting too, right? Than opposed to like, well, I have a bride, she's 25 years old, and
so it's better than like a unicorn pooping $100 bills.
I mean. Yeah, right. Like anybody that just has like $1 million in their bank account, that's my customer, right?
I don't know. I'm pretty big on a unicorn pooping dollar bills. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. The unicorn client. Then we want them all.
Right, but it does make sense, and it does help when you go, okay, let's do a business plan, but let's do it as a dream board. Okay, beautiful.
Whatever format's going to resonate with you, right?
Yeah. So you sold me on this, right? So now I've got my basic business plan. Is it something that you feel like needs to be redone now that we're emerging back from COVID?
So my recommendation is typically you're going to write a business plan. Well, not everybody, but some people start like
put together a business plan. Yeah.
The reality is like that first year in business, you don't really know who you are or what you want or what your business is all about. But it's an important step to at least get some things in place so that you know where you want to go with your business. At about 3 years in business, that's when you start to realize like, oh, I have something here, but it wasn't what I thought it was. So that business plan that you write at 3 years is going to be a lot more valuable and more important than the one that you wrote at the minute that you opened your doors. I would say that any time that your business is going through a huge shift, you're either wanting to expand your business in a different way. Maybe you want to expand markets, or maybe you want to expand services. You've always done weddings and now you want to do corporate. Or maybe you have some bigger goals, or you're trying to reach a better target client. Anytime you have a major shift in your business is where you want to go back and either rewrite the plan or revisit the plan. A lot of times you're writing a new plan when you have a big shift like that. And so with the pandemic, some people have gone through a big shift and they realize like, I don't like the clients I used to work with. I was spending too much time with them. I'm giving them way too much. I only want to do 10 weddings a year. Like, this is just too much work.
Right.
And so there are a lot of people right now going through that reassessment where it's like, I need to rethink my business because I don't want that business. I want a different business. And that's a good time to write a business plan.
Well, that's really interesting because, I'm kind of going through that as well. It's like, what I used to feel comfortable doing beforehand is not what I feel comfortable doing now. I mean, and also as I raise my pricing, my clients expect more out of me.
Yes, completely.
So part of my dream board is having less clients, but being able to be more detail oriented with them.
And that is like prime business plan material right there, right? Because you raised your prices, but it's not just about saying like, oh, my prices are all of a sudden this, right? Now it's thinking about like, okay, well, really, okay, who's going to pay for that? Where are they getting married or where are they doing events? Like, how am I going to build relationships with those new vendors? And right, like, and so all these sequence of events kind of happen when you make a shift like that.
Well, and again, getting from one business plan or one dream board to the next dream board does make me feel like, okay, I need to have an intermediate board going on. Like, where do I need to be in 3 months, 6 months, a year?
Yes, completely. Yes, completely.
And then, of course, so you get to a point in your business and, like I hire on a contract basis. So I have a group of people, Brooke being my main one, that are my logistics experts. So I know that the wedding is going to be handled flawlessly. And I'm there basically for personality and make sure that I'm overseeing everything because, again,
how the roles have reversed,
right? But when do you get to a point that you say it's better to hire somebody that is in your business versus a contract? And really, what is the difference besides me paying the taxes?
So, okay. So here's what a lot of people in our industry think. A lot of people think that it's a choice that you as the business owner makes. The reality is that the IRS has decided it for you, whether you like it or not. They have defined the terms of contractor versus employee. And so with a contractor, I think a lot of times people think like, oh, it's the hours and the tools and like some of those ideas from maybe like 20 or 30 years ago. The reality is that like, if you are defining the way that somebody works, if you are training them, if they're so deeply involved in your client relationships, if you've brought them up like from college and they're brand spanking new, if you're very involved in kind of coaching them through the process of working in your business, they should be classified as an employee. They're very deeply ingrained in your business. It doesn't have to do with, they can work 3 hours a week. Right? Does not matter the number of hours. It doesn't matter flexibility, things like that. Now, if someone truly is an expert event producer, maybe they have their own business. Maybe they provide event planning services for lots of different companies. Maybe they have 20 years of experience and they truly work independently and they are literally showing up. You are giving them the clipboard and they're like, okay, yep, I'm running the event. That person, because they are such an expert in their field, are likely better or okay to be classified as a contractor, right? And so you want to be kind of thinking about like, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And that goes for employees. Like you can call them a contractor, but the IRS doesn't care. At the end of the day, if you have so much investment in how they do their work, how they're being paid, in their finances, how they're being trained, the decision-making that they do behind the business, they're likely an employee.
Wow. Okay. So that just totally threw me for a loop because
that's like pretty much like 90% of the industry.
Well, because to be honest, there are businesses out there that say we only do W-9s. There are businesses that say you may work for us multiple times of the year. We may be calling you almost exclusively, but we only do W-9s.
I know.
Is that really legal then?
Not necessarily. Here's the thing, like just because you're not caught by the IRS doesn't mean that it's the right way to do it, right? Like it only takes one time for you to be in this situation. When I see it flare up, it's typically a few things. A lot of times it's coming from the worker side, right? So the worker doesn't always totally understand what it means to be a contractor. And so they're just thinking like, oh, I don't have to pay taxes. The reality is they're paying their own tax. They're paying all their taxes, right? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes you'll see it kind of flare up if a contractor files for unemployment. Now that changed with the pandemic because they allowed contractors to file for unemployment last year. But before that, that's usually when you would see a ding because then the labor office would go like, oh, wait a second, you're not employed by this person. Oh, yeah, I'm employed by this person, but I'm a W-9 employee. A W-9 is not an employee.
No.
So yeah.
Well, that's really, I mean, because, I find, because then what do if you're bringing on an employee? How difficult is it to adjust your taxes to account for an employee? And then do they also end up making less money over the time because I have to then pay their taxes? So
yeah, usually there usually is a pay adjustment because you are paying their taxes. Also, the rate, here's the thing. When you're paying a contractor, you're assuming that you're paying a business. And to pay a business is a lot more expensive. If I pay you, Keith, to run my event, I'm going to be paying you at least $100 an hour, right? Because I'm paying your business, right? And it's the same with a contractor. A contractor, in theory, is a business that you are paying to execute on their event. You are a client of that contractor, in theory, right? And so you may be paying them a premium. So typically there is a price adjustment. And that there's different strategies for doing that.
Wow, this gets really confusing because there are people that I just hired for setup as an individual that don't have an LLC, that are not set up as a business, that you pay them as an individual, and you collect their W-9 because it has their personal social security number on there. And then there's only if you pay them more than a certain amount, does it really become part of something that you have to report? So there's a lot more to this than simply,
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the thing. I think in most situations, if someone is working for you so minimally, it's not going to pop up on the IRS's radar. And so, if they've worked for you less than $1,000 in a year, it's likely the IRS is not going to find this. When I see it kind of flare up, I see it come up with like videographers that have big teams, that have teams of 20 contractors, floral designers that have huge teams like that. That's when I tend to see these things flare up. I don't tend to see younger businesses flare up as much, smaller dollar amounts, but that's not saying that it can't, right? So technically you can have somebody that works 3 hours a month or seasonal staff, right? Seasonal employee. Think of a restaurant, right? You staff somebody and they may work some Saturdays, they may work some Tuesdays, you're staffing them, according to your needs. And sometimes it may be 5 hours a week and sometimes it might be 20, right? Again, it's not so much how much time they're working for you or how many months. It's a lot more about the nature of their work.
Almost like the intent.
Yes, 100%. Yep.
Like I intend cigarettes and booze. Like I work cheap.
Wow. So what is the intent behind it? And then of course it gets into a whole bunch of tax law that, I would then have to figure out.
So here's the thing that I think really stops people from hiring employees. It's just that small, like little first step in the learning curve. And it's actually not as complicated as people think. But people are so scared of making that first step that they're all a contractor. It's so much easier. But the reality is contractors are giving you W-9s. You've got to process 1099s. You've got to navigate this risk. You should be sending contracts. There's actually a lot of paperwork when contractors are done right that is actually not that much easier than an employee, to be quite honest, right? Because if the contractor's done well, you should be sending them contracts at least on an annual basis, right? That's way more complicated than an employee.
Wow,
an employee, you bring them in, and yes, there is paperwork that goes into it, but there's services these days like Gusto is amazing, gusto.com. They manage all that paperwork when you bring in an employee. Okay.
Right. I'm writing this down.
Yeah. Amazing. You can also get the people plan from us. I don't have the people plan. I'm revamping it. It's going up in the fall, but that's a really great resource of like all the things you need in place to kind of bring in that first employee. And the first time you go through it, there's a little bit of a learning curve, like with everything. And then you've got it going and it's like, oh my gosh, this is actually not as hard as I thought.
Well, and I think that it is also an adjustment for the person that's coming on as an employee because it could reduce what they're making by 30-40%, depending on.
Yeah, sometimes. Usually what I see is like there's like an offsetting that happens. So a lot of times as a contractor, like you're not guaranteed work oftentimes. And so that's where I see the leveling off come in. It's like, as an employee, listen, yes, technically your hourly rate is going to be less, but I can guarantee you so many hours, and you're going to actually end up having like a, part-time or full-time job that makes a lot more sense to you over time, is kind of what it comes down to. But there's different ways that you can kind of make up for losses and things like that with sales commissions if they're in sales positions and things like that. Yeah.
I'm a little bit even more confused now, just because I feel like in the world of events, it's always fluid. I mean, constantly. Yeah. Summertime, sometimes it drops off to almost nothing. Completely. And then you got 3 months that go crazy. Then you may have a couple months that drop off. And then, so how do you adjust your employee? Once they're an employee, they're an employee no matter what. And then that way.
No, not at all. You can have seasonal staff that are only with you for 3 months, right? Like there's no guarantee that you have to
plug your ears. I don't know if I like this lady anymore.
So funny.
I'm kidding. No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm like herpes.
But I think this is important, especially for a lot of us event planners that are out there. I mean, we're all small businesses. Basically, everybody that I know basically started kind of from their house, you know. And said, I picked up a client, picked up a second client, and built a business over time and things got bigger and bigger and bigger. There is going to be that moment that you go, okay, when is it time to now switch over to having employees versus W-9s? And okay, we're now an actual business. That is, I don't even know how to really say this, like more defined, I think is what I'm looking for. More defined.
Me, the benefits of having an employee are huge, right? So I think, like I said, I think that paperwork is really scary for people, or they think, oh, I'm gonna have to pay taxes. The reality is the federal tax requirement's only 7%, right? So you as a business owner don't actually have much more. In Florida, we only have like workers' compensation that's like 0.02%. Other states have other, employee taxes, but it's not even that much. So don't think of the cost and don't think of the paperwork. To me, the benefit of having an employee is that that person is truly a part of your company.
Right.
And the relationship shifts for the positive. It's like it's win-win for the business owner, and it's win-win for the staff person, because all of a sudden now it's like you're really a part of that team, like on such a deeper level. And your chances are, if you have contractors that are kind of like straddling the line a little bit, they already feel a lot for your company as it is. This is going to just ratchet it up to another level. It's a whole other level of commitment that everybody has to each other also. It's the employee to the company, but it's also the employer to the staff person. It's so much more family focused once you can evolve to that employee place.
Well, I feel like there's like a little dirty underbelly thing going on that I'm part of a little bit, because there are so many people that use this as extra money, extra time. It's much easier for like a $300, got paid $300 for this move on kind of thing that don't get reported. We understand that's all part of.
And that's real talk. What? That happens, and that's fine. It is what it is. I'm not gonna.
But again, it's like, how do you take that business to the next level? I do understand about the fact that it becomes more family oriented. People feel like they're part of the team. I mean, when I got Brooke business cards, her face lit up like Christmas tree.
I literally built an office inside my multi-purpose room that does like 4 things now. And this side is like and that's the biggest part of my room now, is like my office for them. She takes her job seriously, kids. Kind of.
No.
Yeah, no, I do.
But that was like kind of the first step, and then talking to you, it's like going to be one of the things that I start looking into, going, okay, is it worth bringing her on as an employee, and just because I feel like I need to at this point?
Yes, for sure. Without getting into all the details of your business or your relationship, it seems like it. Yeah.
Well, no, I feel like it. It's now is the time, especially because you had said before we went on air that we are in a cycle of upward business for the next 2 years.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
You feel like that? You feel like that?
Oh, at least 2 years. This is the boom that we everyone that's still standing is like, this is what we're waiting for. Now we may, grow more gray hairs and things like that because of all the work we have, but let me tell you, it's good to be working, right? So people want to party. People want to party. It's not just the postponement of events from last year. There are a lot of people who are eagerly wanting to party. And it's not just people like, well, we didn't want to get engaged because of the pandemic. It's people that like, well, we may not have always wanted to celebrate kids' birthday parties, but now, God damn it, I'm having a kid's birthday party every single year,
Not a bounce house available in town.
I'm doing everything. We're celebrating everything forever.
I know. And and the other part of that is that there was a lot of stimulus money out there, but we're running into lots of issues with hotels and their staffing. I mean, it's just crazy.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I mean, gets to a point.
The staffing side is the complicated part of our industry right now. Events and the hospitality triggers into our industry. And there's going to be a very big shift in how the labor market in all segments of the country and world, to be quite honest, is going through this huge, massive shift in terms of how people work from home or don't work from home, but hours and pay and, shared jobs. I do think that we are in the next 20 years going to see a change in IRS defining contractors and employees. What we really need is something in the middle that's truly a gig worker. It's been needed for the last 20 years, and I think we'll see it, but the IRS is so late, we're not going to see it for another 20 years, but it's going to happen. Yeah. So anyways, there's a huge shift happening. In hospitality, it's really, really strong. It's going to trigger into our industry. And the good news is that there's a lot of jobs to be had by people right now. And that to me is exciting. I think that anytime when there's like more opportunities for people to work in different fields and possibly jump fields, it's just better for everybody. So
I love the fact that you said that there needs to be an in-between, because I
100%.
literally started to sweat during this conversation. And I mean, I was like, oh my God.
I didn't like her, that I liked her again.
I know. I mean, I was like, oh my God, I'm doing this wrong. I need to fix this. And
no, you're not.
Right. And that's the thing, is that I feel like there needs to be an in-between. There needs to be something for, especially for the event industry, because again, everything is so, it's not the same as like working for a restaurant where, you only make $2.15 an hour.
So many industries, look at what Uber has gone with. I don't know if you followed like any of the litigation, and it's usually like state-based, like California has been really huge. California has taken this contractor IRS rule, and they have their own law called AB5, which is like, it's basically this contractor law on steroids. Like, it's so hard to do business there, hire contractors, like truly hire contractors there. And so Uber has been one that's like, no, they are contractors. They have their own cars. They have their own thing. And California is like, no, they're employees. This is where the gig worker needs to exist. It's not just events industry. There's so many shifts in how businesses run these days in this, shared economy that, need to have this gig worker.
Marcy?
Is there anything that we can do as people in the industry to facilitate the government to maybe add that feature earlier than like 20 years that it's probably going to take them? Is there anything that we can be doing?
That is such a good question.
Loaded question.
I don't know that the IRS is like easy to move. Like, who are the lobbyists that go into right? I think if we're going to see it, we're going to see it from technology companies, right? Like, I think that it's going to have to be the Ubers of the world that help all the rest of us. And Uber has a hard time doing it. Uber's like only one example, but there are other industries and, trying to kind of see if some of those, but here's the thing. As much as I think it's going to happen, the fact that AB5 came up in the last 2 years in California, which is even a tighter screw of that, is almost like a step behind from it, right?
That's what I was
but
thinking.
usually things have to do that. Like we have to go to one extreme to finally get to the point where things are moving to the other side, right?
So to me, so far, everything we've talked about has scared me.
Yeah, I'm like, I can handle
You know
this.
what, I have to tell you though, like whenever I give this talk or I give this presentation, people are in the audience like this. Like,
I know. I mean, come on. There's a moment that you're like, whoa, really? I'm doing everything wrong. The IRS is coming after me tomorrow.
I'm afraid to see the comments in the chat right
now. I got to call my tax lawyer because I don't even have a tax lawyer. I'm like, oh my God.
I'm not going to answer.
You don't need a tax lawyer. Just go to gusto.com and just start learning a little bit more about what it looks like to bring on an employee. You're going to be fine.
That's awesome. I mean, I do like to the fact that I'll go back to, it feels like they feel a little bit more permanent. They feel like they, I'm talking about the employee, by the way, that, they have a buy-in into the business.
Yes.
They've bought into it.
Happens when you die.
That's exactly the word I was going to use.
And I'm like,
they have
die
a
before.
buy-in.
Because we're empowered. I mean,
Yeah, there's a lot to be said with that. But when I think about bringing on an employee, though, then also I start thinking about standing operating procedures. I start thinking about employee handbook. I start thinking about all the pieces and signatures that I used to have sign when I started on with somebody else. And what did
baby steps.
And I'm super judgy, and if I don't like you, it's not happening.
You're out. I quit.
Unless you can do what I do, it's not happening. So I do have like a little bit of I don't have an ego, but I know that I can push that one, maybe two things, and that's about it. Other than that, I still have to listen.
You're so funny. No, but, I know, but I mean, so here you are in a stationery company. I'm going to go way back to your because
I love you, Jonah, by the way.
Right. So we go, if you're back at your stationery business. Did you have employees when you owned your stationery business?
I did. That's how I learned a lot of this stuff, was hiring them. And gosh, really? I don't know. I never considered having contractors. I don't know. Maybe it's because I was always an employee of different companies. And so I understood the process of being employed by somebody. And so it never really occurred to me. I'd also worked in jobs where there were shifts, right? I was a barista for Starbucks in college and things like that, right? And so I kind of understood that. I also worked for really great companies that had amazing benefits. And what I realized, it wasn't necessarily about being able to offer all the benefits. It was about how you made people feel. And so I really loved that nurturing relationship that you can have with your employer or your boss, right? For lack of a better, boss has such a bad name, but it can be such a powerful thing. And I love that mentor relationship that you can have with a really great boss, or the opportunity to mentor others. Right. And I had that. I had it at Deloitte. I had it at Starbucks. I had it at Coach. So I worked with some really amazing companies that I'd seen the benefits of having really strong teams.
So what is one thing? Okay, so I'm a new business.
Yes.
I've survived COVID. And I'm gonna say event planner because that's what I can relate to. I'm an event planner. My business has finally gotten to a point that there is steady business on the books for a year, right?
Yeah.
What is one thing that I could then put into practice that would make me a better business person, just in general, as a better business owner?
Well, okay, let's
a couple things.
Let's assume you have your business plan, because I always tell people, like, the first thing you start with is a business plan.
I have my vision board.
You've got your vision board. I love it. Okay. I'm going to say you need to have a financial plan. So we're taking a different step away from, staffing and operations and things like that. Like, you need to know how your business is going to make money. And as creatives and artists, I always think like people kind of put this on the back burner, because let's be real, like nobody starts an event business to become the next Steve Jobs, because that doesn't exist, right? But you do. This is way too much work to not be thinking about the dollars behind the business. And so you really do need to think about having a financial strategy in place. Like, how are you going to make money over the next few years?
Right.
So are we talking about a financial, like a business financial picture overall on a monthly basis?
So let me break this down into like 3 parts of like financial strategy, because I think people get really like mumbled with like, oh, I have my tax guy, and then I got my bookkeeping, and then it's right. Okay. So there's there's 3 pieces of financial strategy. You've got your tax strategy, which most of us have tax people, thank God, because that's convoluted and nobody really wants to do it. The second piece of your strategy is bookkeeping. That's where you're recording what's happened in your business, right? I spent $10 on a Starbucks with a client. That goes into my QuickBooks expenses, right?
Mhm.
And so that's recording. That gives you the power to look at data, to look at reports and say, oh, this is how much money I made last year, right? So that's bookkeeping. And I gotta be honest, that's not the sexy side of accounting and finances. Like, but you have to know what your business has done in the past to make decisions in the future. And that's the third piece. So that's the strategy piece. That's where you get into like sales forecasting, expense budgeting, cash flow planning. That's the fun side to me, because I love when people are like, I want to grow my team, I want to grow my business, I want to make $1 million. And I'm like, yes, let's do it. How do we get there, right? And so creating that path for people is so powerful, because here's the thing. We are not always very good with risk. And so we're holding ourselves back from making changes in our business because we can't see anything. We're walking around blind. And so we're like, oh, I don't know if I can bring on that staff person. I don't know if I can expand my office to Palm Beach. Like, I don't know what I can do, because you literally don't know what you can do. You have no sight.
Right.
And so a financial plan, a financial strategy is going to show you like, oh, wait a second, I can do this. I've got all these contracts coming in. I also know that I can book additionally, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm going to have this much money and I spend this much. That means I can do these things. And all of a sudden, risk goes away. It's so crazy, but risk goes away when you have a financial strategy in place.
It's interesting because I have both of those, by the way, the tax strategy and the bookkeeping, because one of the things I really realized is after I had been doing my books for myself, and I actually have to credit my mother on this, because she said, you have to do your own books for your first 3 years. I don't care who you are.
Nice.
She said, you need to understand how the money is coming in and where the money is going.
Yeah.
So that way,
very intelligent.
right? Exactly. So that way you can look at your reports and you absolutely understand that.
That is the best advice.
Right. And so it's been huge, but it also let me see that, there were times that I was leaking money and I was like, where am I leaking money from? How am I?
Here's my purse.
Right. Right. So funny. That's right. Right into Brooke's purse. But I realized it, and it was never big items. It was $5 here, $12 there,
Totally.
$50 there, $60 there. Oh, there's a membership that I don't remember being part of, but is automatically withdrawn. And it's amazing what happens when you start doing your own books and you start doing and you're logging that every single time, and you start going, wait a minute. What is this crunch fitness? I haven't worked out since 2009. There's no way I have a fitness plan on here. And but I think it's amazing. And it's one of those things that I'm really glad that I have to do. I hate doing it. FYI. I absolutely hate doing it. It's so
boring. I mean, even
it is so boring.
It's really boring, but you're absolutely right. I tell people that all the time. Even if you have a bookkeeper, you need to know what's happening in your books so that you can make decisions, so that you can find those little leaks in your business, for sure.
Yeah, well, and what happens if your bookkeeper is not so great and they're skimming 2 or 3%? I'm just saying.
I've seen that. It's true.
Right? Because you hope that people are honest, but they just aren't. In many ways.
Sometimes it's not honesty. Sometimes they're not as skilled as you thought they were when you hire them, and people are hiring people that they don't really know what to look for always, and that person's maybe not recording things in the best way.
Right. Well, so here's another, and this is not so specifically with anything that I would consider like numbers oriented. It's more like a feeling. When I built this business and I created it, one of the things that I've always said is that I wanted to be super supportive of anybody that I was working with. Like, I am a huge supporter of Brooke about her starting her own thing at some point.
Good.
Push her out of the nest kind of thing. She's like, absolutely not. Screw you.
When you can replace me, we'll talk.
It's true. But
and until then, I have job security.
Right. But, but there's also that other part of you've built this, you've created this. Nobody really understands the amount of work that goes into building something. I mean, and it can be multiple things. How do you then protect yourself against I don't know, not even identity theft. Yeah, maybe it's identity theft a little bit, or theft of processes and procedures and things that you've put into place. Or do you just say, well, look, that's just the name of the game. I stole from somebody else at some point. I figured out like what they were doing and I incorporated it into my world.
Yeah.
I
think if you as a boss or a mentor have a spirit of generosity, it's going to come to you. There's like immense loyalty that comes from that. Pushing the baby bird out, like, I can sense already that Brooke has immense loyalty because of that respect that you have, for her and the generosity that you have with her. You're going to get so much more. And so I was similar in my invitation staff. I was always like, listen, I know you're not going to work with me for 100 years. That's not realistic. So if there's anything I can teach you to carry on, like I want you to have that, right? Because I want you to grow from this job. And let me tell you, people stuck around for a lot longer than I think. I think they needed another job because I didn't maybe pay them enough, or I didn't give them enough hours or whatever it was. But they loved that generosity and they stuck with me for a long time. Here's the thing. Even if you do have a bad apple that might come through, it's not going to be Brooke, I can tell, that comes through that like steals your secret sauce. It's like, really? Well, what's the secret sauce that they like stole? Your timeline for your client? Like, how are they really going to execute on that? Like, the magic of what we do in events is like the execution, right? And nobody can, reproduce Keith Willard, right? Like, so yeah, take the timeline. Who cares? There's a gazillion timelines out there in the world that you can take from. Really, what's the secret sauce? It's your soul, right? It's your relationships, and nobody can steal that.
Well, and plus there's so many
personality too.
Right.
I mean,
1,000%. They want to do business with you, right? Like they don't care. I can give somebody, my cash flow. Listen, this has happened to me. I've had workshops stolen. I've had templates stolen. I've had so many things stolen. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, nobody knows numbers in this industry like me. So there's nothing there to be stolen.
Well, and there is something to be said about being self-assured and to a point that you're like, look, there is not another me out there. And it's funny that you even said timeline, because obviously, not obviously, I will use Timeline Genius now, and oh my God,
Timeline Genius.
Like we had Eddie Babbage on a couple of weeks ago, and he was oh my God, he was such a nice guy.
Love him.
But what do you think about this work compete clause that you see in some people's, like, I don't understand it.
Actually, all the legal advice that I've ever gotten is it won't hold up in a court. So yeah, go ahead, have somebody sign a non-compete agreement. But everything that I've ever read or been advised on is that it's very hard, almost impossible to enforce, because you cannot prohibit somebody from working.
Well, that just got triggered.
I know.
A non-disclosure is more powerful. And so if you have a non-disclosure that lists out some of your documentation, that's more powerful to use than a non-compete.
Yeah, so I don't understand non-competes, and it's one of the things that Brooke and I had a long conversation when I first met her, was a non-compete that she had with another company. And I'm like, don't worry about them. Non-competes that, they're not even worth the paper that they're written on. I mean, I don't.
Before we get too far in, because I want to talk on something, because I don't talk that much. And it's about when you were saying like chemistry, personality, and the bird leaves the nest. True story. Keith was like, within 1 year, he's like, we're already structuring like percentage of warehouse goods for me to have to go on my own.
Yep.
Well, I didn't sign up. Can I do this? Can I do just as good as a job with a different personality, but almost the same as Keith? Of course. He knows that. He can give me any wedding right now and go off overseas and know it's going to be handled perfectly. I didn't sign up to do this by myself. I signed up to do this with Keith. And that's
look at her. Look at you. Love it.
I love what I do.
That's cool.
1,000%.
The relationship that was formed. I mean, it was a Boston employee at first, and he's turned into be my biggest, one of my two best friends.
Well, and I'm also your biggest fan.
I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah. I mean,
I love that. Thanks for sharing that, because that's so true. I think people don't realize in our industry, we're so scared of people walking out or stealing our shit or whatever.
Right.
Am I allowed to curse on this show? I'm sorry.
Yes, you are. We say shit all the time.
Okay.
Ask Eddie.
Ask Eddie. Exactly.
So paranoid about that. But the reality is, most people in this industry don't want to be bosses. Most people want to be able to do good work and get paid for it. And so many people start businesses because they don't have somebody that will employ them to do the work.
Right.
I think 80% of business owners in this industry would, if you were to go back in time and say, oh, when I started my business 10 years ago, oh, even me as this invitationary designer, like
Right.
if 15, 16 years ago, somebody had said, Michelle, we want you to come and work in an amazing stationery business. We know you love stationery. Will you come work for us and we'll pay you X, Y, Z? I would have been like, yes. There's no, even though I'm very entrepreneurial, it was much more about being able to create. And if someone's going to pay me for it, even better.
Right. Even better. Marcy, you were going to say something?
Yes. If you have employees and you wanted to put something like that they cannot take or discuss your clients to another competitor, is that something that could be put in a non-inclusion,
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I would do that in a non-disclosure. And so
a non-disclosure, excuse me.
I'm not a lawyer, so this is where I'm kind of like getting in an area
Nervous.
that's not me. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I have to back up a little bit, but
that's all right. You just put in your disclaimer.
I have been advised by lawyers.
Right.
Go talk to your own lawyer. And what I personally do is, in the non-disclosure agreement, things like client relationships is one of them. Also things like it can be any procedures that we have within the company. You can't disclose that to another employer or to a future employer. You can also include like trade secrets.
Right.
You can also include like a vendor directory. Like you can't disclose that to a future employer or to another organization. There's tons of stuff that you can include in there. Also, you can include things like branding and copywriting protection. So, Keith, a while ago, you had mentioned like an employee handbook. This is where an employee handbook can be helpful. And employee handbook is a little bit different from like operating procedures. Operating procedures is kind of like your procedural, like your production process, right?
Right.
But like employee handbook is like, if you like, don't talk to press without getting authority from the owner of the business. Don't post on social media under your own account unless you've tagged our account. Like it's all of your rules of being an employee.
Right.
Basically, integrity, and then you have to bullet point every single thing you cannot do.
And
you should already know not to.
Exactly. Like you should just be a good person.
Right. But unfortunately, there's not all of those people in the world.
Not
so
always.
I do understand.
And some people don't know. Like some people don't have common sense. Like why are you posting on your social media picture of the bride getting dressed? Like no.
Right. Well, the other, the big one would be don't reach out to our previous clientele. They're my clientele, not your clientele kind of thing. And if you go off on your own, you should not be able to reach out to them after you've been working for me. But I totally get that. Oh my God, Michelle, you've been amazing. I hope you stay with us for After the Veil.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So we're going to have a quick word from Mike Sipe Entertainment and we'll be back in 30 seconds. See you shortly.
More than just entertainment, we understand the importance of the entire wedding day celebration. From the moment you select the date until the day of the celebration, we are there to provide you and your family with the peace of mind you deserve. Mike Sipe Entertainment Events and Productions has been providing entertainment and production nationwide for over 30 years. Our company motto is your day, your way. And our mission is to provide our clients with the most unforgettable entertainment experience while promoting an atmosphere of trust and togetherness. Learn more at themikesipe.com.
Welcome back. So Brooke always runs off to, use the facilities during this time. She'll be back when she gets back. But, as I was watching the Mike Sipe commercial, I was realizing that our South Florida community is so small anyway. And, one of the big things that people probably get into and maybe should be thought about is how you talk about previous employers or employees. I mean, I feel like it makes the person saying something bad look bad versus what they're saying about somebody else.
100%.
I mean, I don't understand the whole idea of when you have a bad situation, a bad meeting, a bad interaction, why would you talk about that? It's a lot more can be said with, we had a disagreement and that's really all I'm going to really talk about. You know what I mean?
Completely. Yeah.
Because then of course it actually stirs them up a little bit. They're like, oh, He's being very quiet about that.
Well, then you're kind of feeding like this cycle of gossip. And again, you're so right. Like if someone's talking badly about somebody else, to me, it's like, well, what are they going to say about me when I'm not around? Like that's what I always think is like, yeah, so you don't want to be talking badly about anybody.
How very
else.
dare you?
It's
just rude. It's tacky, it's classist, and it's rude.
100%. 100%. So why did you, first of all, okay, you had a stationery company. How hard was it to have this company, the stationery company, when I don't feel like people really give it justice of what a specialty kind of art form this is. I mean,
yeah, and that was like mid 2000s, so it was different. I feel like people do respect it a lot more. All that being said, I feel like the online digital printing has changed the industry so much. I'm glad I didn't have to compete with the Minteds of the world. It's like it's a whole different ball of wax, right? So I think because I was there in the mid 2000s, like 2004 is when I started my stationery business. I was just talking with somebody about how much easier it was to compete in those days. I mean, on the Knot, there were only maybe 5 vendors in my area.
Wow.
And I was in Seattle, and I was like one of the first Junebug vendors when Junebug first launched.
Oh yes,
right?
okay.
Yeah, when they used to have their little list, the best of 10. So like I was one of the first ones, with Blair and Christy.
Well, I mean, but that is the case. I mean, but being in an industry where, especially on the wedding side of it, I mean, it is amazing how many people think that, oh, I could do this. I can easily do this, and it doesn't matter
now. It's a totally different thing. I feel like it was so much easier to compete 16 years ago.
Well, and then of course now here you are, and people I'm sure come to your speaking engagements and go, I could do that.
For sure.
I can get up in front of everybody and keep everybody kind of focused for an hour and really be able to. I mean, what is it like for you now being on the speaking circuit and being in front of 1,000 people? Like, do you feel like there's an anticipation of everybody coming to it about what kind of speaker you're going to be or what they're going to get out of it? I mean, God, that's a lot of stress.
There is definitely a buildup. I would say that speaking has changed a lot too. It used to be, I think it used to be something that was a little bit more special, right? So there were fewer speaking engagements.
Right.
They typically used to pay, except for the biggies, right? Like the biggies, the organizations and things like that didn't always have funds for that.
Right.
But it's changed because there's so many that I think it's kind of changed the specialness of what you also receive isn't always.
I feel like it's not as intimate sometimes as it used to be back in the day, right?
Yeah. And
is that because of the internet, you think?
Yes, completely. I also think like there's so much more access to education, right? You used to go to a conference and it'd be like, this is the one place I have to learn this thing, and I'm going to learn it. I'm going to take notes. And now it's like you can do a course and you can do this, and you can do deeper dives than even in an hour-long presentation. But let me tell you, the thing that hasn't gone away is the one-on-one relationships that you can build at conferences. To have that FaceTime with people is still so powerful. So powerful.
And I tell people all the time, it's like, oh, should I go to the conference? I'm like, yes, you should go to the conference.
Yes,
oh my God.
1,000%. You're not going to get the same from the online course at all. You're not even going to finish the online course. Let's be real here.
That's true. Absolutely. Or you're going to fast forward through it. But it's not just that. It's just that people meeting people one-on-one, and you build those relationships and memories. When you go out after a conference and you have dinner with people, which inevitably happens, there is just something about that conversation that goes on that you start building those ties. And so that night, next time maybe you need something and you go, you know what, I'm going to reach out to Michelle. She was so awesome. Do you remember that dinner that she brought up so many different things that we were talking about? I mean, I feel like it's the one-on-one networking. And I know during COVID, we all adjusted to the online networking thing and it never felt the same.
Never. It never did. And let me tell you, I still have great relationships with people that I met at like things that don't even exist anymore. Eventology. It was like some little intimate, wedding industry thing like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm still friends with those. Some of those people have hired me. Sometimes I've hired some of them, right? Like those relationships that you make in those one-on-one meetings at conferences, even if you are shy and only talk to 2 people, you never know where it's going to go from those 2 people that you talk to.
Well, Brooke's
maybe
coming.
your next employee.
Yeah, that's true.
You know?
Well, so Brooke's coming to Las Vegas, so she's not going to the overall conference, but she is going to be hanging out with all the conference people because we're going to be hanging out all week. But and actually, you're coming to the welcome reception and the gala. What am I saying? You're going to be part of it.
Yeah,
but
I'm
this
like
is
the
kind
down
of.
I just spot. Yeah, I'm going somewhere, honey.
But the nice thing is that this is her first foray into what it's like.
I'm
right?
super excited. Like half the
know.
people that have been on the show for the year and a few months, year and a quarter maybe.
We're gonna see them.
I'm gonna physically get to. Well, they get to meet me.
This is
what I
Vegas
said.
or Miami? Are you
I
guys
get to
talking
meet
about
them.
Vegas or
So
Miami?
Yes.
Nice.
Nice.
Oh, Vegas.
Oh,
Oh.
nice.
So it's
Okay,
like-
okay.
Yeah.
Are you guys
So
going to be the
excited.
special event?
We're
Source, one or the
actually
other?
so I have Brooke and I have a summer intern as well that I bought tickets to for the first day to go to the exhibit hall to do the keynote speaker and I
Good.
think one other event, and I got to look up the tickets, but at least it's here, so it's nice because you got to pick and choose your conferences because they get really
Completely.
expensive really quick. I mean,
Completely.
I'm going to the
really
exhibit
great.
hall.
Yep.
Exactly.
Well, I'll be
And-
there. I'll be here because I'm in
Yay.
Miami, so I'll
Oh,
be at
good.
the conference. So
Yay.
look me up. Let's connect and at least say a quick hello. or
Oh, that'd
coffee
be
or something like
fantastic.
that. Yeah.
That'd be fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't realize how much Miami and South Florida really has to offer. I mean, one of the things that Governor DeSantis
Wait,
did is that they never shut us down.
Don't you think that people in the last year have realized everyone has moved to South Florida? Like,
I know.
stop.
I know. I feel like it does, right? It feels like everybody moved to South Florida because they were like, well, if I'm going to have to go somewhere, I might as well be by the beach.
Yeah. I used to say that we were the best kept secret because really, I don't think you're right. I don't think people realized how much we had to offer. And I think everyone this is amazing being here. And it's like, okay, you can stop. We're good. We're good. We're
And
no longer a secret anymore.
So
the housing market has just gone crazy. I mean, nothing stays on for like more than a day.
I know.
So what's your favorite? Which one of your? I hate to even put you on the spot about this. How do I word this so it doesn't put you on the spot? What is one of your favorite conferences and why specifically? One of, because we all have multiples. Is there a favorite conference that you've gone to? And it could be one that's coming up or past. And it could be a specific conference too.
Well, I have to say it's my own. And I know that I'm really, I have limited perspective in that. But BCH conference, and the reason why I love it is because it's intimate. It's never more than 100 people. I matchmake everybody at tables. So you're typically sitting with people who I want you to learn from, or I think that you have something in common, or you're going through similar challenges. The speakers I select are always selected with what I call like grown-up problems. So I'm targeting the issues of like business owners who have been around for at least 10 years.
Right.
So we're talking about things like an exit strategy. We're talking about how to employ absentee ownership. We're talking about improving your retirement plan and hiring managers in your business and things like that. Grown-up challenges.
So talk about that a little bit. When is your conference? How do people find out more information about it? Give us a little bit give us the 30-second sales pitch.
Yeah. So it's every winter. We are starting the planning for that right now. So it'll take place February or March, 2022. And we're typically in a warmer climate. We'll need to see this year because of COVID. Everyone wants to do events in the South in the winter. So we may change things up a little bit and do something cozy and wintry this year. But yeah, we typically have anywhere from 6 to 8 speakers talking about experienced topics that you're not going to hear. We're doing deeper dives. We're doing a lot of mastermind sessions. Mm-hmm. And attendees are typically pretty well experienced in business. So you're sitting with people who have been in business a few years and facing the same kinds of things.
So if you were going to get your associates in business, this would probably be something you'd want to go sit on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
perfect.
And why did you even start this? I mean, we were talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they also have a small conference that they do.
Yeah.
And I was really interested to hear like why they started it. Why did you decide to start this? Was it like, oh, it's a great way to bring attention to my business. It's a great way to educate my peers. I mean, what was the driving force behind going, you know what, I can do a conference?
My clients were no longer facing startup issues, and that's kind of what it came down to. And so we used to teach the Simple Plan, which was a 2-day business planning workshop. So talking about business planning. And a lot of those people that I worked with in 2009, now they have businesses that are 10 plus years old. And a lot of them are, continuous clients with me. And I started seeing them kind of going through the same thing where I have 10 staff people, and I'm working like crazy with all these staff people. It's like, well, you need managers. And I started seeing a lot of my clients need to hire managers and not knowing how to relieve themselves of the management position. And so inviting somebody to speak on like, what does it look like to hire a manager and step out of management and more into a CEO role of your business, right? And so I started seeing these challenges with some of my more experienced clients. And I was like, man, there's no conference out there that's talking about some of these things.
Oh my God, see, I love that. And you were like, look, there's a need, I'm going to fill this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean, but that's the entrepreneurial spirit there.
Totally.
I'm just saying, it is totally the entrepreneurial spirit because you're like, there's a need. I'm the one to fill that. Perfect.
Yeah. And the camaraderie of it too, right? I feel like if you've been in business for, 10 plus, and I say 10 plus, but I'd say somewhere around 5 to 20, right?
Right.
Here's the thing, like sometimes you're the last man standing in your market. And that sounds weird to say that, but there's fewer people that you then have to lean on when you've been in business 20 years and maybe the people around you are 5 years in business, right? There's less peer mentorship that can happen when that happens.
Well, Michelle, you have been a doll. That is the hour's already done. Oh my God. I have to tell you, it is rare that I go through so many mixtures of emotions where I literally sweat to joy. It was awesome. And you've given me a lot to think about because now I'm like really thinking, well, does this make sense for me to bring on employees? Because, well, we all know that Brooke is already employed, but she's it's so funny. She like signed off. She's like, I gotta go. Okay. Anyway, so thank you again for being on Behind the Veil,
Thank you for having me.
And I would love to hopefully have you on again in the future because I know that we're gonna
do it. So fun.
Because I feel like there's gonna be some follow-up questions here that I want to dive a little deeper into.
Fun. I'll come on whenever you want.
Awesome. Well, all right. So that's it for this Tuesday. Join us next Tuesday at 2. We've got Angela Prophet that is going to be our guest next week. I know that it's going to be interesting, but for now, everybody say goodbye.
Bye.